The gymnasium at Maplewood Elementary smelled faintly of fresh varnish, old basketball leather, and the buttery popcorn being sold near the entrance. Bright overhead lights hummed, throwing their sterile glow over rows of folding tables, each carefully decorated with poster boards, props, and gadgets. It was STEM Innovation Day, a much-anticipated annual event where students brought in their science projects to present not only to their teachers and peers but to parents, visiting engineers, and local reporters. Excited chatter mixed with the squeak of sneakers on the polished floor as clusters of families moved from table to table, admiring robotic arms, baking soda volcanoes, solar-powered toy cars, and even a 3D printed chess set. The hum of ambition filled the air. At the far end of the second row, near the emergency exit doors, sat a table that looked far plainer than most. There were no flashing lights, no wheels or wires, no complex machinery. Just a single sheet of cardboard laid flat as a display base, with the words Amara's Aerowing scrawled across the front in careful, neat handwriting surrounded by hand-drawn stars and swirls. Behind the table stood Amara Collins, an 8-year-old girl with wide, observant eyes the color of roasted coffee beans, her hair neatly tied back with a purple ribbon, and a faded lavender hoodie zipped up against the gym's stubborn draft. On the table, directly in front of her, rested a single paper airplane. At first glance, it seemed like a child's plaything, just a folded sheet of white paper. But anyone who looked closely would notice the way its lines were crisp, the folds razor-precise, as if measured under a microscope. The nose was sharply pointed but reinforced with an unusual internal tuck, the wings fanned back at a strange angle, and tiny folds at the tips formed shapes almost like fins. It looked less like something made in a classroom during recess and more like a miniature prototype from an aerospace lab. Amara stood quietly, her hands clasped in front of her, scanning the room without making direct eye contact. A group of fifth-grade boys, loitering near a neighboring table displaying a Lego-built robot arm, spotted her project. One of them, a tall, freckle-faced boy named Kyle, grinned at his friends before sauntering over. "Wow," he said loudly, so everyone nearby could hear, "Look, guys, she made a paper airplane for STEM Day. Guess she didn't get the memo that we're supposed to make science projects." His friends burst into snickers, one of them muttering, "Bet it doesn't even fly." Amara's cheeks warmed. She had known they might not understand her project, but the sting of their mockery still landed hard. She kept her eyes on the table, her fingers tightening slightly against the cardboard. Standing a step behind her was Marcus Collins, her father. Marcus was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a mechanic's build, wearing a worn denim jacket over a flannel shirt. His hands bore the faint grease stains of his morning shift at the auto shop, and faint shadows under his eyes told of the double shifts he'd been pulling lately. But nothing could keep him from being here today. He'd taken off early, sacrificing precious paid hours, because this was important to Amara, and anything important to her was important to him. He heard the boys' laughter and saw his daughter's small frame stiffen. Leaning down slightly, he murmured in her ear, "Let them laugh, baby girl. They don't know what you've built." She nodded almost imperceptibly, but her throat felt tight, her confidence threatening to crumble under the weight of the sneers. What none of those boys knew was how many hours had gone into that seemingly simple sheet of paper. For months, Amara had been fascinated by flight, not just paper airplanes but the principles behind them. She had checked out every library book she could find on aerodynamics, gliders, and wing structures. She had watched slow-motion videos online of planes slicing through the air, pausing them to sketch airflow patterns. She had experimented with dozens, maybe hundreds, of folding patterns, most of which ended in the trash when they didn't fly the way she wanted. Her bedroom floor had been littered with crumpled paper more nights than not, but she kept going. And finally, she had found a fold sequence that behaved differently. This was not a dart that nosedived after 2 seconds or a glider that wobbled off course. This was something cleaner. Smoother. "All right, next up, Amara Collins," a voice called, carrying over the noise of the gym. The judge walking toward their table was Dr. Evelyn Hart, a retired aerospace engineer known throughout the district for her sharp eye and even sharper tongue when it came to STEM presentations. She was a woman in her early 60s, her hair an iron gray bob, her glasses perched low on her nose, and her clipboard clutched in one hand like a general's sword. She didn't believe in sugarcoating. If a project was sloppy, she'd say so. But she was also known for spotting talent where no one else thought to look. Dr. Hart stopped in front of Amara's table, her gaze flicking from the hand-painted sign to the paper plane. "Miss Collins," she said in a crisp tone, "tell me about your project." Amara swallowed, feeling the weight of eyes on her, not just Dr. Hart's, but the group of boys lurking a few feet away, still wearing smirks. It's a paper aircraft," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I designed the folding pattern myself. It uses a combination of delta wing shape and a rear fold that creates microvortex lift." She pointed to a small diagram she had drawn on poster board beside her, showing arrows curving over the wings. "The angles help reduce drag and increase lift without needing tape, weights, or glue." Dr. Hart's eyebrow arched slightly. "You designed the folds yourself? Not from a book?" "Yes, ma'am," Amara replied, her voice gaining a fraction more steadiness. "I tested it a lot, in my hallway and outside when it wasn't windy." The older woman studied her for a moment, then asked, "May I see it fly?" Kyle and his friends leaned in closer, their smirks widening. This was the moment they were waiting for, when the little girl's big idea would flop in front of everyone. Amara picked up the plane carefully, holding it like it was made of glass. She took a deep breath, lined up her stance, and threw. It didn't just fly, it glided. Smooth, steady, arrow straight. The nose stayed perfectly level, the wings catching the air in a way that made it seem to float more than fall. It traveled across the gym in a near-perfect arc, not losing speed until it was within inches of the far wall, where it landed with a feather-light touch. The chatter in the room dimmed, replaced by a ripple of surprise. "No way," one of the boys muttered under his breath. Dr. Hart's gaze followed the plane's path, her eyes narrowing in focused interest. She walked across the gym, picked it up, and examined the folds like she was inspecting a rare gemstone. Her fingers traced the angles, the internal tucks, the symmetry. When she returned, she looked directly at Amara. "Do you know what you've done here, young lady?" Amara shook her head slightly, her hands clasping together again. "This fold pattern, this specific design, creates a stability I've seen aerospace firms struggle to replicate in lightweight gliders. They've spent millions trying to reduce wobble and drag in small-scale unmanned drones, and you've just," she held the plane up between two fingers. "Solved it. On paper. Literally." Marcus's chest swelled with pride, his tired eyes shining. But Amara's mind reeled. She had only wanted to make something that flew farther than anything at school. She hadn't imagined, couldn't have imagined, that it might be worth anything beyond that. The boys who had mocked her looked as though they wished they could vanish into the crowd. One of them muttered something about needing to check out another table and quickly slunk off. Dr. Hart set the plane back on the table gently, almost reverently. "I'm going to make some calls after this," she said firmly. "You may have just created something far more important than you realize." And with that, she moved on to the next table, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Amara glanced at her father, unsure whether to feel excited or overwhelmed. Marcus crouched down so he was eye level with her. "See? I told you," he said, his voice warm with pride. "Sometimes the simplest thing, done right, can outfly all the fancy stuff." She smiled faintly, gripping the edge of the table. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet confidence began to take root. Neither of them knew it yet, but this was only the beginning. That single folded sheet of paper, born from late nights and persistence, was about to change their lives, and the aerospace world, forever.